Hello, everyone, and welcome to twitch.tv/ the Onyx Path, where today I am joined by the wonderful and lovely Danielle Lauzon, who will be doing a question and answer for the Trinity Continuum Player's Guide, which, in case you are here and are unaware, it is currently raising funds over on BackerKit. If you look below my face, you'll see a nice little ticker that'll keep track of any pledges that are made, see where we're at. No pressure or anything. And we're going to dive in and just talk a little bit about what to expect in the book. If you have any questions in the chat, just feel free to type question in all caps at the beginning. You can highlight your message as well with Chips of Onyx. Both of those will help us make sure that we see them. And we will try to make sure we get to everybody's questions before the day is done. Also, I'm told we are simulcasting over at the BackerKit page. So if you head over there, the lovely Ian Watson has thrown a link to that in the chat. I think you can watch along there, and I believe if you pledge while this stream is going, you'll be given an option to have a shout out fed to the Twitch chat so that we know that you've pledged and we can thank you for that. We are test driving all of this technology thanks to the wonderful people at BackerKit. We were able to play with some beta features, so I'm very pleased and happy to be able to do that. And thank you all for joining us, but especially Danielle, thank you for being here. I greatly appreciate you taking the time.
Hello. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to try out this new streaming thing on BackerKit itself. This is kind of cool. The UI for it seems really interesting. It's showing up when I'm looking at comments and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm excited to answer questions. So if you have questions, I noticed some people have already started kind of throwing things into the chat. We'll get to them. So just, keep doing the question things, and we'll answer them as we can.
Definitely. But before we dive into the numerous questions, and yes, do please keep them coming from the audience. I just want to touch base real quick. Let's say somebody's stumbling onto the channel and have so far managed to avoid any information about the player's guide.
Sure.
What can you tell us kind of from a bird's eye view of what to expect in this book?
Sure. So this is a player's guide to the Trinity Continuum. The Trinity Continuum core is based in a modern era, and it's designed to give characters kind of this over the top, larger than life feeling. And you can use it to play all sorts of different genres of games, from investigation, intrigue, spy type stories, to heist stories, to Fast and the Furious style car chases, all sorts of different genres of the kind of modern action adventure stories. And the player's guide delves into some of the subsystems of that, giving some more in-depth rules on chases, investigations, heists, and also delving into the setting of the Trinity Continuum in the modern era. And one of the setting elements of the Trinity Continuum in the modern era is that there are weird things in the world, from alternate dimensions, the continuum, to aliens who have made contact with Earth, even if the people of Earth haven't realized that they've had contact, and also various other things that hint at the future eras that are to come, such as the ability to shrink, which is seen in Aberrant, So we go over how to do games in the modern era that center around these strange experiences, such as going to alternate dimensions, traveling through time, going to alien planets, shrinking down to very small, going to the Microverse, doing underwater adventures, all of those things. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
I guess just to piggyback on that before we get too far, because it does dovetail nicely into a couple of the questions that have already appeared in the chat. What sort of dimensions beyond the broad brush of shrinking or underwater, are there like alternate dimensions that can be visited? Can you give us a little insight into what those might be, and how those might function?
Yeah, so alternate dimensions in Trinity Continuum are effectively the possibilities that could have happened had things gone a little bit differently. So every choice that is made by every single person, every single moment of the day, if there is a choice between 2, 3 different things, sorry, I'm moving away from the camera because I'm wrangling my little hooligan of a puppy.
We always make allotments for pets on the channel. It's fine.
Yeah, he is awake and he's making it everyone's problem. So the way that the dimensions work is anytime anything happens, you could go one way or the other way. When you choose to go this way, an alternate dimension splits off in which you went the other way. Those dimensions are nearly identical to our own, and there are billions of them. But they're not necessarily interesting or meaningful. But some points in history or points in people's lives where one thing happens and another doesn't makes the dimension that splits off from it very different. And you can think of points in history such as, what if, what if I don't want to use tropey things, but I will, what if John F. Kennedy was never assassinated? What if the Nazis won the war? What if? And these give these dimensions that are completely different from our own. So we have 2 different versions of dimensions that we talk about in the Trinity Continuum. One are what we call close tangents. So these are things where the dimension is different enough from ours to be interesting to go to, but similar enough to ours that it looks a lot like our modern day world. So something might have happened in the recent past or in the distant past that didn't necessarily change a lot of events that would lead us to this point, but enough different events that the dimension feels different, and there's different pieces of it that make it feel like it is an alternate dimension, but it is recognizable.
And so, just to kind of piggyback off that, just for a question that sprung to mind for me is, would that entail things like, for example, like a more personal character arc type thing, like your character made a different decision, and that's the fulcrum point by which
it could absolutely be that, yes. It could be that your character made a different decision and that's the fulcrum point, and now you are in a different timeline of events in your life. Or it could be something that is group focused. Maybe your group made a decision, but it could also be something that is, maybe citywide, nationwide. You can kind of play around with close tangents in this in the sense that there are some differences. But some of them can be subtle. And so visiting those may feel like you didn't travel at all until you find that difference. So yeah, those stories can be very personal.
Almost like a butterfly effect, like the early. I don't know if you're familiar with the film, but like the early scenes in Butterfly Effect, where at first he's like, "What do you, this doesn't seem that different," but then it builds up.
Right.
That's cool. That's super cool.
Uh, Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, you had spoken about the close tangents, and what were the other type of tangent?
Yeah, I was about to get to that. The other type of tangents are called far tangents. So far tangents are weird. They don't feel like our world at all. Essentially, they are a dimension that diverged from our own so far in the past that everything has changed. Like essentially everything that could have gone the way that we got our world happened differently. So instead of the dinosaurs dying off, they became the master race of the planet in modern day. Um, Octopi evolved into the sentient species of the planet. Um, Now there are all of the animals in the world are uplifted. There is no humanity. Humans are wildly different and alien to what we're used to seeing. These can range from wildly different to, big historic points like what happened if the Roman Empire never fell.
Right. Kind of almost
So,
like a Star Trek sort of like. This is what it would look like if the Nazis won World War II. This is what it would look like if this culture was dominant. Yada yada yada, kind of thing.
yeah, I mean, to a certain degree, the far tangents are well further back in history to the
Okay,
point where everything is like everything is different. It's somewhat just unrecognizable as our own.
gotcha.
And so, some example far tangents are completely, uninhabited by intelligent life. Um, there's some weird empire that arose that doesn't look like anything you've ever seen on Earth. Um, the world is completely dead. You step out into an apocalyptic hellscape. Um, all sorts of things that you could uh, step into when you step into a far tangent dimension.
excellent. And that brings up another question from chat. And again, sorry to just sort of dive into that, but that
No,
reached out and spoke to me, and I thought we wanted to grab it before I missed it.
sure.
But are talents able to open these gateways between these places? Are they able to access inherently access these alternate dimensions?
Yes. So dimensional gates, especially, just kind of exist in the world. And they may, that may be the plot of a story is that a dimensional gate is just open somewhere and the other world is kind of spilling through into our world. Talents can, of course, access these gates. Um, they can also open gates. There is, I need to, let me, before I just, talk off my, uh, you can, you have there is a ability called dimensional mastery. You can open a flux gate that is closed. So you can essentially see that there is a flux gate around, and anything that is a gate either to another world or another dimension or another place is a flux gate. These are well, that's not true. Let me go back on that. There are all sorts of different kinds of gates. Flux gates go to different dimensions. There are also time rifts, and there are planetary gates. Either way, talents can absolutely open flux gates because flux is their element, as it were. That is what we call inspiration for a talent. It is fueled by the flux of dimensions kind of rubbing together. And so flux gates are inherently a talent interactable thing. Time rifts can act like gates, and so can planetary gates. But those need either time gates or sometimes just kind of open. You may be able to go back in time because you found a door that leads you to 1932. And they may require a special device to open. But you can also get gifts that will let you open them. So all of these things require either an item or a gift, but talents can open absolutely all of these things.
I was gonna ask to follow up on that. Is there like are there mechanisms presented in there for like accidental opening of these gates, or encountering them in the wild? Like, oh crap,
Absolutely.
I fell down the stairs and now I'm in ancient Rome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's these gates can always just kind of be open if that serves the story.
Well, and before we dive too much further into the macro cool, I know everybody's very excited about the interdimensional and sort of different worlds that can be visited, but there's also a lot of material in the first two chapters of the book that deal with kind of expanding on the allegiances that are presented in core, but also expanding on kind of the system mechanisms that allow for different types of scenes to be introduced. And part of the reason I bring it up is I saw a couple of questions in chat about using this material across different timelines and things along those lines. Now, with the allegiances, I would assume that those are focused mainly in the modern setting. But as far as the chapter 2, can you talk about a little bit about how that not only applies to the modern setting, but how that might apply throughout the continuum if you wanted to pick it up for, if you wanted to use it for your anima game or your Aeon game, it'd be just as, I would assume, just as functional, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The talents are in talents or inspired folks are in every era. In the past eras, they have pretty much everything we do is a talent. So a talent, an inspired person. I'm going to put huge air quotes on talent because talents are the evolution of daredevils from adventure. And by evolution, I mean they don't really change in ability between adventure era to the modern era, but stalwarts kind of evolved to the power of novas, and mesmerists evolved to the power of scions or syads. So that is, but daredevils don't really evolve to a power. They just are called talents in the modern era. In Aether, everyone who is using powers, again, they're using the inspiration system. Even in Aegis, the people are using the inspiration system. So our past is using inspiration when our future uses psi and quantum and inspiration. But the inspiration system, talents, the characters who pull on flux are in every era. They are in every future era. They never go away.
So it kind of we don't really see kind of the first real tangenting off in eras announced so far until Aberrant.
Right. That, and there's a reason for that, and one of the reasons is that uh, the and Ian can probably say all of this better than me, but I'm going to take a stab at it. The people who came before the adventure era, all of those people who are pulling into inspiration and dealing with flux, are doing so in a natural state. It is a rare thing that happens naturally. In the adventure era, the scientists of that era notice flux, what they call telluric energy, and start to fiddle with it. And when they do, they cause a giant explosion of energies, which is called the Hammersmith incident, because Dr. Hammersmith was the person fiddling with this telluric energy. And that explosion awakens the ability for people to become the bigger version of the inspired. That awakens the ability to become novas, to become syads. But in that moment, there's an alien race that notices that explosion, notices the potential for humanity to become novas, to become syads, and goes, "Oh no, absolutely not."
This is bad. This is all bad.
This is bad. This is all bad. And puts a giant, like, dampening dome over the world. So nobody can become a nova or become a syad or advance, beyond that. And so we have stalwarts and mesmerists. So they're still hitting inspiration. They're still on the verge, but they never go quite beyond that. And in the aberrant era, what happens is that Divis Mal, who is a nova already and has been since the adventure era, because that happened to him before the bubble was placed around the world.
Right, you have kind of the big three who were kind of
right, really close.
It blew up in their face, and they got extra special power.
Right. So he's been trying to recreate this explosion because he believes that he recognizes, like, why aren't these people advancing to my level? Why not? And he believes very strongly that humanity should be advancing beyond where they are, and spends a lot of time trying to research and recreate this explosion, and eventually does, breaking that barrier, which allows novas to start erupting. So yes, we don't see that eruption until the aberrant era, even though humanity has the capability from the very beginning.
Gotcha. And one of the things that I found very interesting and compelling, because I full disclosure, I wrote on this book, but I did not have a bird's eye view of its contents, and I wrote a very, I was in my own little small, no pun intended, area, but so in seeing the whole thing come together, seeing how, like, not only do you have, like, these cool heist rules, chase rules, things that would apply no matter what you're doing, whether you can throw those into an aberrant game just as easily as anywhere else.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you also have this wonderful section on gifts where it not only kind of recompiles these gifts from various eras and redefines them specifically for talents. So being able to see some of these things that maybe were introduced, for a squire, or were introduced in the aberrant book, and sort of reframes them for a talent-centric campaign, but also expands on those. And can you talk about that a little bit, and about the design, not only the design challenge, but some of the design ideas that you dove into as you were exploring that?
Yeah. So we So Monica did a lot of those gifts, the kind of translations, and then made up some new, just kind of generic gifts for talents. The people who wrote the microverse or the alternate dimension sections wrote gifts that went along with those sections. Um, so you'll see a lot of very specific gifts for underwater things or for being small. Um, and you'll also see some pretty generic gifts that are just making you good at chases or making you good at heists or just making you cool. Um, and Monica wrote a lot of those gifts. And when we talked about how we wanted to approach this part of the book, Eddie had suggested, and this was, Eddie had suggested, hey, let's take some gifts that showed up in some of the other books and make sure they're accessible here so that anybody wanting to play a talent doesn't need to pick up the adventure book to find the cool gifts from there, doesn't need to pick up, all these different books. We'll just have this companion because this is for talent specifically. And I was like, that's a cool idea. But instead of just reprinting those as they were, I asked Monica to take those gifts and make them feel like they were for the modern era. And one of the things that we did was we took assassin masteries and we made those into talent level gifts because, Monica developed assassins and she mentioned to me that in the Assassins book, they talk about how talents can have gift versions of some of the masteries, but they don't have any examples of that. So she wanted to make some examples of that and put them in the talent book so that if you're playing talents in Assassins alongside Assassins, you could have some examples of what some of those assassin masteries might look like at a gift level, which I thought was a great idea. And so I was like, hey, make sure that all of the gifts that you're translating have that kind of feeling where it's like, this is specifically for talents, no matter what book it came from. So there's a gift in Aberrant that specifically allows talents to kind of have the ability to use enhancement to level scale. Talents can access scale, but not nearly at the same ability that Novas can. And this gift kind of allows them to balance the scales a little bit. But in the Aberrant book, it is specifically geared towards, reducing Nova scale or reducing the difference between Nova scale. And that gift was rewritten to kind of just say anything that has.
You're fine. Yeah, it basically sets it up so that it's not Nova dependent, it's not era dependent. And if I can drop I was just if I can drop a minor, I guess, spoiler. One of the gifts that I remember working on is specifically geared toward like giving a talent scale as long as they are not on the normal size field on the planet
Right.
Earth. Like anywhere else you go, you're kind of like Flash Gordon, right?
Yeah.
You're just kind of a football player when you're back home, but when you go off to Planet Mongo, you're suddenly awesome.
Yeah, like John Carter of Mars kind of Flash Gordon thing where,
Right.
yeah.
Exactly. And so, though these gifts are framed toward the modern era, these are things that could just as easily be plugged and played, much like the chase rules, much like the heist rules. You could say, "Well, I'm gonna shunt all this stuff over into my anima game,"
Yep,
you know,
absolutely.
and have a wealth of things to draw from.
Yeah. And one of the things, the player's guide is to talents, not necessarily to the modern era. So
Right.
while we talk a lot about the modern era, especially with the allegiances, really, if you play a talent in any era, a lot of this will translate over.
Right. And I don't know that I've worked on like every era, but it seems to, if memory serves, every era kind of has a little guideline within its own book of like, if you need to port some, here's a couple you might want to, if you have something that's about broadcast technology, maybe here's how you tackle it, things along those
Right.
lines, so that making it backwards compatible is very very straightforward and very simple.
Right.
I did see a question in here. Oh, did you have something before I move on to the
No,
next
no,
one?
sorry. I'm trying to calm the hooligan.
All good. Someone did ask, is crossover to other story path games possible, or is it too hard to do?
So when you say other story path games, you mean like Scion or They Came From or uh, that kind of thing? And you know, if you want to intermingle those games because you're doing a dimensional hop and you're like, oh, we've made it into the Dystopia Rising world, or oh, we're now on a movie set in a They Came From game. You can do that. Um, but there are some places where the design of the games are not so parallel that things might kind of feel a little grating for you. So if you're going to do something like that, I would suggest just using the rules for Trinity Continuum and just kind of have the trappings of the alternate setting. If you have characters from, say, Scion, and you want your talents to interact with your heroes, it's gonna feel weird.
Right. There are a couple of places. I don't think it's unfair to say. There's a couple places, a couple pain points that you would hit that I don't think that the Trinity Continuum Player's Guide would or should uh, touch on. Like Scion operates at a different base scale than Trinity does. Like a base person in Scion, I think, is scale 0, and in Trinity is scale 1. Or I'm getting those backwards. It's not impossible. But so like if you can address those pain points, I think you'd probably have a better thing. But that's not explicitly laid out in the text for you.
No,
This is a
no.
Trinity book, so
Yeah.
proceed with at your own peril, as it were. Someone had asked, could you do the Doctor from Doctor Who? Could they exist in the continuum? Um, I think. Well, it seems to me like a lot of the sort of tropes and trappings of Doctor Who are very much in line with what we're seeing in this book, in terms of like dimension hopping, time hopping. But if you could elaborate on that, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we do have some, we have pretty decent treatment of traveling into the past, which, you know, there's Doctor Who kind of goes past, future, you know, all sorts of different things. But there's no restriction. Like we talk about talents can really only go to the past and not really to the future. Um, but there's nothing stopping you from adapting, say, the alternate dimension feel for things that are happening in the future, um, to kind of make a wild time ride a la Doctor Who.
Yeah, I think that the materials within here support that pretty well, because you're kind of hopping around, and we've talked. I know we dialed in early about dimensions and time, just because of the questions, and please do keep them coming if you're in the chat. But let's talk a bit, if you don't mind, about some of the other fields of adventure that this book opens up for the players. So in addition to time and dimensional travel, there are a couple of other areas that Chapter 3 opens up. You had mentioned briefly planetary travel, which I know is covered kind of in detail in Anne. So what does this what is this bringing to the party in terms of planetary travel?
So, planetary travel in this sense is kind of this. Uh, do you want to do the planetary travel aspect sans Aeon, right? So, if you're most planetary travel games are going to be an Aeon, you're going to be Scions, you're going to be doing the Scion ability to psychically master literally everything around you. Uh, this is giving instead ways for talents to kind of go through to different worlds. And the idea of this is that it allows people to go to different worlds without having to literally travel there in a spaceship. So instead of fudging the technology that you would normally be necessary, there are these gates that exist that connect worlds together. And allows you, it's very similar to dimensional travel, except it's not dimensional travel. So if you wind up pissing off an alien race on another planet that has far advanced technology and can travel to Earth, you may make a problem for all of Earth. That's not going to happen in a dimensional game, right? If you piss off people through a dimensional portal and you close that dimensional portal, they're sealed off from the world. But if you do that on another planet, you may cause, War of the Worlds.
Right.
So the stakes are a little different.
Might kick off an invasion.
Yeah, so the stakes are a little different. And there's also some things to think about. Most of the dimensional changes are going to still be on Earth, probably as Earth is a habitable planet. The gravity is going to be the same. The size of the Earth is going to be the same. The atmosphere, maybe not the same, depending on the tangent. But a lot of the things that you would take into consideration for space travel just don't exist for dimensional travel, where when you go to another planet, it may be half Earth's gravity. It may be twice Earth gravity. It may have a completely different atmosphere. It may have a different day cycle. It may be much larger than Earth, much smaller than Earth. It may have a different water ratio. All sorts of things that you don't really have to think about when you're doing dimensional travel. If you want to think about it like the dimensional travel is more of your sci-fi space opera running off to other dimensions. You don't have to care about the science of it. If you want to do planetary travel, you're probably, you're still running off to weird places, but you want to maybe think more of the science of it.
Would it be fair to say there's a little bit more of like at least broadly speaking, dimension travel falls a little bit closer to soft sci-fi, whereas planetary travel, you're getting more into hard sci-fi?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And a question I saw in the chat that I think ties into this nicely is, does the player's guide detail a bunch of the tangent options, or does it generally describe the types and let the story guide and their imagination create them from those components?
We do both. We do both. So you'll get kind of upfront a little bit of like, here are the kinds of dimensions or the kinds of worlds that are out there, some considerations if you're making your own. And then we have some concrete example of alternate dimensions. Here's essentially a story hook of an alternate dimension with some thoughts about the people who live there, what's going on in the world. And the same with planets. We have some detailed planets that you could visit that have, all of the information you would need to run a game where you're visiting that planet.
Well, and I just want to call out real quick, we're about 15 minutes to the end. So please make sure you're getting in questions. Please make sure if you've not yet done so, head over to the backer kit and toss a little bit of money at the crowdfunding campaign. You can get access to the manuscript. You take a look, and if any of these things sound interesting to you, you can dive in and learn a bit more about them.
Yep.
One thing I wanted to kind of dovetail from that off of, and I promise to be as succinct about this section as possible because it feels self-serving not to be. But the microverse is presented in a similar fashion. There's kind
Yep.
of, we have a hard science fiction, like you get smaller and you're fighting bugs or amoeba, and this is kind of what we know about the mechanistic universe, as it were. But there's also kind of a gonzo element that's introduced or you get smaller and go to weird alien worlds that are more akin to kind of like almost what you might have seen in Quantum Mania, which was a lot of fun. So was that, I guess, from a broader perspective, was that just the design? Was that a result of architecture, or was that a result of just how things kind of came together for the book, in terms of having that hard sci-fi, soft sci-fi division?
I think it just kind of lends itself that way. One of the things about the Trinity Continuum is that you can kind of play any action adventure oriented, high action story. And so you're going to have stories that fall more in the soft sci-fi genre, and you're going to have stories where people are wanting to be more focused on the hard sci-fi elements. And so when you're thinking of all the different ways that people can interact with the game, naturally you're going to wind up detailing both.
Cool, I like it. And we have not really touched too much on the oceanic sort of exploration. So can you talk a little bit about that section in terms of what players might expect for
Yeah.
undersea adventure?
Yeah. So, the same, it's set up the same way as the other areas that you could travel. It gives kind of a overview of what it's like to travel there, what kind of considerations you need to take to do underwater travel. Um, all sorts of stuff like that. And then kind of gives some like ideas of the kinds of things you may find in the remote areas of the world, that unexplored sections of the ocean, especially in the deep ocean, and some threats, some ideas of what could you find down there, and then some hard examples of societies that live underwater. There's a really cool society that's living underwater that is essentially in a sunken like station, and they are trapped there.
So like a colony by accident, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
So like Biodome.
So yeah, yeah. So there's all sorts of interesting things about that. And so it gets a very similar treatment to the other sections in that, what is there to do? What can you run into? And then here's some hard examples.
That's awesome.
Since we don't have a whole lot of time, I'm noticing some questions about gear and items.
Yeah, I was just about to tap into that.
Yeah, so let's talk about the kind of the next chapter after that one, which is the rules chapter, which all the chapters kind of have a little bit of rules in them, except for the allegiances chapter. But this is where you get like the edges and gifts and some detailed gear. And the gear in this book, let me see. Let me just y'all will get to it if you back the Kickstarter. We give access to literally every scrap of the manuscript. So if you haven't backed it and you want to see the manuscript, you absolutely will get access to it that way. But let me get to equipment. This section of the chapter is long, and this includes vehicles. But I want to give you an idea of how big this section is.
So you're looking at vehicles not only for traveling within just kind of the spaces that are laid out for adventure areas, but also traveling between them, right? So there's vehicles that might allow for travel across dimensions, or vehicles that might allow for travel underwater, vehicles that might allow for travel to the microverse.
Right. So equipment and vehicles together are about 12,000 words.
That is a not small amount of.
Yeah, I would say that each entry is anywhere between 150 to 200 words. So you can do the math on how many entries we have. So there is basic gear, there's super science gear, there's regular vehicles, and then there's like aircrafts. So you're gonna see a lot of stuff in this. So somebody wants an example of a super science item. Okay, so from the cover of the book, this is kind of a funny story. I asked for some art where there was, somebody using a cool shield to block some bullets while the rest of their team was like coming in through a window that they had cut a hole in to enter into like a skyrise. And honestly, that art is freaking delivered. It is gorgeous art. And
a really cool piece.
Is really cool. And Mike asked me, was like, hey, is that shield something that's going to show up in the book? And I was like, well, it is now because I want a cool shield. So it is an item in the book, and it is it's an artifact, and essentially it is a energy shield. So it has panels. I'll just read it to you. Energy shields are made to order units designed to cover a wide area and protect not only the user, but those who might stand behind her. These shields have panels of energy that radiate from a center spoke and form hardened barriers, preventing both fast and slow-moving objects from bypassing them. When not deployed, the shield fits comfortably in a pocket or pack. When deployed, it stands about 1 meter tall and about as wide. These shields can only be used by the person who they're made for, as they're biometrically imprinted upon creation. And so it has the tags composite, so it's ballistic and impact. It provides hard armor and is a shield. It also has it confers the edge fast draw, which means you can whip it out super quick.
Nice.
And the gifts destined for damage essentially allows you to take damage for somebody else. You essentially redirect attack to you that's targeting someone else. So this shield redirects attacks to it.
Awesome. And I do want to just take a moment to shout out and give thanks to Ardrick, forgive me if I'm slaughtering the pronunciation, for backing during this very stream. Greatly appreciated. And I wanted to call attention, there were a couple of things. I know you had spoken about it a little bit on the Pathcast, but can you elaborate just a little bit more about the connection between the various gates introduced in this book and Aether Gates from Aether?
So Aether Gates are... I might butcher this as well. I worked on Aether, but it's been a hot minute. So
I'm deep in the middle of an Aether project, so I'll happily pull you back from the edge if you if you wander too far afield.
Yeah. So Aether Gates are both. So they're not necessarily dimensional travel devices. They're spatial devices. There are also dimensional, like they also do let you go to different dimensions, but they let you also travel between spaces. And so they are almost, if I, had to draw a line, a combination of a planetary gate and a flux gate, in the sense that you could imagine that leftover Aether Gates are now what are time rifts, or not time rifts, planetary gates that are just out there in the world, hanging out. And the same with Aether Gates being, now they're these dimensional flux gates. They're leftover Aether Gates that either someone created or had been, had been there, that somebody put a gate around, which kept it in place into the current era.
Cool. I thought there was one more that I had missed. I wanted to touch base on. Oh, I just wanted to call out that someone had pointed out you could take for example, if you were looking at using the materials in this book along with other story path games, you could, for example, grab the chase rules from here and Dystopia Rising Evolution to get a Mad Max game, which
Absolutely.
sounds like delightful fun. I think we got about 5 more minutes of time. Is there anything? I know we didn't get to delve too far into the allegiances. Just we kind of skipped past that part. So, is there anything that you want to share or focus on or discuss about the allegiances that are included in this book?
Um, well, if you are following the Pathcast, this week, this kind of a 3-part series, last week, this week, and next week, we are doing character creation for, kind of promote this. And we talk about Polyphemus and Noor, because those are the two allegiances that Matthew and Dixie picked for their characters. So let's talk about, I think some people were asking questions about the Transcendent Alliance.
Yes.
So let me kind of talk about them a little bit. The Transcendent Alliance are kind of a scientific research group that they are looking into things like artificial intelligence and augmenting human ability with technology. So doing that kind of transhumanism aspect of augmentations, implants, bringing us to that kind of, an aeon where you can have biometric implants. This is the Allegiant that's kind of on the forefront of that research. So they used to be kind of a little
shady.
Shady, yeah. I was gonna say kind of amoral.
Right.
They didn't really care what the consequences of their actions were. They are now more careful about the ethics of what they're doing. But they are absolutely will still consider methods that will reach their goals, even if those methods aren't exactly ethical. That doesn't mean they're going to always do that, but they're definitely going to consider it.
They're more morally flexible, perhaps, than some of the other their allegiances.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're coming on to the last 2 minutes. We got 2 questions that we can do rapid fire answers to, and then I'll get out of your hair. Question 1, can we make literal everything everywhere all at once thing with character jumping around dimensions and meeting themselves, even with hot dog fingers?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And question 2, if you have time, what sort of optional rules to make the game feel more streamlined at your table are we going to see?
So there is a a story guiding, oh my God, a story guiding chapter that talks about ways to take some of the other rules that we haven't talked about in the other chapters of the book, where we actually expanded rule sets and kind of either streamline those or plan for them. So one of the things I will say is that there is a small treatment of outscale in the story guiding chapter. I won't tell you what it says because I don't have time for it. But I will say that there is a small treatment, and the gist of it is how to kind of ignore scale. Not ignore it like, oh, well, your scale doesn't matter, even though you have a power that gives you scale. But instead, divorce yourself from constantly thinking about whether or not scale matters in every instance that it could come up.
Right, focusing on applying it when it is narratively useful and ignoring it when it's not.
Right, exactly.
Excellent. Cool. Well, that is it for our time. But I want to thank you very much, Danielle, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to do this. This
Sure.
has been a super cool conversation. I want to thank everyone who has joined us, those who have backed during this. Looks like we got about 5 backers during the stream. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much. If you've not yet done so, please head over to BackKit and support this. I know you'll be appearing on the Pathcast at least once or twice more during the course of this, and you'll be joining me and some other folks next Tuesday, I believe, for an actual play. We're doing a series of actual plays throughout the course of the campaign. If you've been familiar with the channel for any length of time, you've probably seen the Story Path Showcase, several of which have focused on several eras of the Trinity Continuum. So because I love making life as complicated for myself as possible, I'm going to be running a couple of crossover actual plays where people will be playing their characters from other various eras, and there'll be time and dimension travel shenanigans, and there might be some tomfoolery as well. So please do tune in for those. Once again, Danielle, thank you for your time. Once again, to the audience, thank you for your time. Head over to BackKit and make sure you are taking care of yourselves and each other, getting your shots, washing your hands, wearing masks, and all that good stuff. And we'll see you again real soon.
All right. Thank you, Travis.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.